Jason from KC Cardini Libraries, back with our second part to our creative screen time on pixel art. For those of you joining us for the first time, this is actually the more advanced and more challenging video. If you feel you're up to it, absolutely come right ahead and have a look. We are just going to pixelapp.com, and then to get started we just need to click on Create Sprite. Otherwise, if you're still pretty new at this or you've not done that before, I'd suggest you check out our first video, and that will show you the basics, and then you can jump into this one afterwards and see how you go. But for now, we'll get started by clicking on Create Sprite. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some of the more advanced tools that we didn't cover. Some of them aren't really quite advanced, but I thought I wouldn't show too many things at once. But this one will have a little bit to go through, so bear with me. But feel free to stop at any time to try out anything that I've showed you. So with that, we will begin. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Space Invader file that I worked on last week, just so I can show you some of the tools and what they do. So if we go into this import folder here, click on this. You don't have to do this, but you can if you want. If you created a Space Invader, then you can try and do this as well. Or if you just create anything that you want to try and edit, well, you're going to go to browse.piskel files, and I'm just going to open up Space Invader, and then click on Open, and then it'll ask me, how do you want to import the new content? I want to replace Sprite. So this will pop up and it'll say, this will replace your current animation. Are you sure you want to continue? And we're going to go OK, because we don't have a current animation, so that's not going to oversave anything, so that's fine. Otherwise, if you do combine with Sprite, it will come up as a new layer, and that might be a bit difficult to edit, but we'll get into that later. So click on OK. And now we have our Space Invader guy from last week. And so what I'm going to go through today is some of these other tools that we didn't get to look at, and also some of these other tools, and also back over here, layers again, which will be a pretty important thing if you want to do more complex stuff, but makes it easier as well. I'll go through that in a second. But firstly, we are going to look at the Lighten and Darken tool, and I'll show you how that works. So with this Lighten and Darken tool, for those of you who aren't very good or comfortable with picking out highlight and shading tones, you might find this tool very, very helpful. So as you can see, once you highlight this tool, you'll see a box pop up saying hold Control to darken and Shift to only apply once per pixel, and I'll show you what that means actually. So with that, we'll click on this, and we don't have to choose a color here. And if you don't press any of the keys on the keyboard, this will lighten pixels automatically. So you might think it's just spraying white, but it's actually slowly lightening the pixels to a lighter color, and that's how it lightens. Now, if you go back to here, you'll see holding down Control will darken. So if I hold down the Control key and start clicking, you'll see it's now darkening the pixels. So in a way, it's pretty much just shading it. The only issue with this is you can make it go too dark or too light too quickly, and then when that happens, it's kind of called an image burn. You kind of burn the colors out because it looks like it's burnt. So Control and Z on the keyboard to undo, and we'll just get rid of that. Oh, too far. Control and Y to redo, and there we go. So the best way to use this tool is just to click on the areas lightly, or hold down the Shift, and this will go into the apply only once per pixel. So what that does is, if I hold on to Shift and I start clicking on the mouse, as long as I don't let go of the mouse button, it will not lighten or darken anywhere that I've done already. So this will stop the over lightening or burning of colors. So just keep that in mind. That's pretty important. But otherwise, I'll show you what happens if we don't hold down the Shift button and just See, it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter until it's white. So holding down Shift will only let it do an area that you've colored over once until you let go and click on the mouse again, and then that will lighten it again, as you can see. So now I'm holding down Shift again, and that's only made it the next shade lighter. So this is really good for just fine controlling what you want to do. So just keep holding down Shift, letting go, and hold down, etc., etc. So that is pretty much how this tool works. So it's good for just plain highlights and shading, but if you want to add particular different colors or hues of shading, then this isn't going to work, unfortunately. So give that a try and play around with it, and then you'll be able to find that you can do shading and highlighting much more easily. Okay, so I've just reset my screen back to how it was when the file opened, and then the next tool we're going to look at is a very useful tool called the Paint All Pixels of the Same Color tool, which is a pretty big mouthful. But how it works is, so let's say we want to make this a Space Invader pink. So I'm going to open this up, and I've chosen these just a bit earlier on, and I have this pink color available, and I'll show you the difference between the Paint Bucket tool and also this Paint All Pixels the Same Color tool. And the Paint Bucket tool, if we were to use this, is going to get everything that's connected to this green color that's of the exact same color value. So as you can see, because these areas are blocked off, it's not going to go all around all these places. But because it's the same green color, we would ideally like that all to change at the same time, so we don't have to manually click here, click here, click here, click here, and then click here to get all of those colors filled. So I'm going to Control and Z on the keyboard and undo all that. So this tool, Paint All Pixels of the Same Color, if you click on this, you'll notice that the moment I click this into a color value area, it's going to make every single other color of the same value change at the same time, no matter where they are or if they're separated or connected. And there we go. So all of these are connected. All of these that are not connected are now changed. They all have the same color values. So that makes editing things much more quicker. And then same thing, I'll do this with the darker shadows, which you'll see here on the arms as well, and on the side of the face, and just underneath the body. So I'm going to go back in here and pick a darker color. And again, I'll show you the difference between the Paint Bucket. So Paint Bucket is just going to do that section, Control and Z, whereas this Paint All Pixels tool is going to do every single pixel that's the same color on the screen. So pretty cool. Now, how about, now if we look over here, you go, oh, but my first frame is now a pink Space Invader, and it's changing for every other one back to the green, and now I'm going to have to go through all of these and go through that process again. Well, actually no. So if I go back, too far, Control and Y to go back. Now if I were to look at this menu again, it says holding Shift will let me apply the changes to all frames. So let's give that a try and see what it looks like. So I'm going to pick back my base color pink. Now I'm going to hold Shift and click on this, and watch what happens over here when I do it to all of these frames. Okay, let's go. Bang! That makes the changes to every single frame, which is really useful, and that makes things so much faster if you've had a change of mind in the color that you want, and you've got lots of frames to work with. So let's try that again. So with this Paint All Pixels tool highlighted, we are going to hold down the Shift key, and done. Not only has it done every single pixel in this frame, it's done it for every single frame as well. So I'm going to go back in here and pick the lighter pink color, and then again hold down the Shift key, and that's changed everything. Oh, I have one stray one here. And that's changed every single frame, and now we are looking at the animated image, and our Space Invader is happily pink through all the frames again. So that's pretty much how this tool works, and I will just go back to how this was before we start on the next segment. What? Okay, so the next tool we're going to look at is this hand tool. Now, what you can do with it is pretty basic. However, there is something cool with one of these options, which I'll get to. So with the hand tool, it pretty much just lets you move the pixel around into a different position, so you don't have to redraw these pixels elsewhere if you decided you didn't want it in the spot that you originally drew it at. So you'll see though, however, if you do move something out of the corner and then you try and bring it back, that is going to delete it. So be very careful of that, because unlike more powerful programs like Photoshop or Pixlr, it doesn't actually remember what's outside of the canvas and it won't keep it there. So just be really careful of that, otherwise you might delete pixels. But as always, you can hold Control and Z on the keyboard, hold Control and tap Z on the keyboard to go back, and then we can go back to that spot. So aside from being able to move this around, what is the advantage? Well, if you look at here, you'll see that now the position has changed and it looks like the Space Invader is darting back and forward. So with that, we can actually go in here and move each of these. That one can stay. And just like that, it will look like it's being animated. So that's actually pretty cool. So that makes movement animation really, really, really easy. And also, it stops you from having to redraw every single frame in a different position. Like, otherwise it'll make it hard. So because of that, it's always ideal to have your first frame fully done up perfectly as much as you can before you start animating it or putting extra frames, because otherwise you're going to have to make a lot of those changes over and over again at different frames. So anyway, that's one way of animating something moving, and we'll go and undo all of that again. Now, the other feature that's really cool is, as you can see here, Shift, while we're using this tool, will actually make this change, make it move for every single frame. So now all of them have moved, and all of them are now up here. This is useful when you have an object that needs to animate, but it needs to stay still in one spot. So yeah, this again, it stops you from having to redraw them every single frame or shift it individually every single frame, but with the hand tool. So Control Z. Now the really, really cool feature is if you highlight the Move tool again and look at what Alt does, it says Wrap Canvas Borders. What does that mean exactly? Well, Wrap Canvas Borders, as I discovered, is, so hold down the Alt key, and if you click and drag this, so remember when we didn't press any keys, if we move this out of the canvas, it would delete the image. It would delete the pixels. But what happens when you hold down the Alt key while you're using the Move tool? It appears on the other side. So this will come in very handy for if you want to animate something like this, like a whole bunch of aliens scrolling past the screen, and you can do this frame by frame. The other way where it'll come in really useful, which I'll show you later for our advanced challenge, is for moving background. So if you have a unicorn or a bird or a butterfly or a vehicle traveling sideways, and you want them to be stationary while the background's moving, this is the easiest way to do it. So that tool will come in very, very handy for scenery and backgrounds. And how are we going to differentiate the background from the foreground and animate it without deleting pixels? I will get to that soon. And that's got to do with what layers are. But for now, feel free to pause the video at any time and just give that a shot yourself. Or you can try all that afterwards once you've watched the video and then just do it together when you're watching it a second time. So we'll now move on to the next tool. So the next thing we are going to look at is the Shape Selection tool, and that is this one over here. Now what it does is, it's pretty much like the paint bucket, except it just lets you select the pixels. There we go, so that's selected the light green bits, and what you can do with it is pretty limited. So you can either copy and paste the selection, and I'll just put a new frame so you can see it, and paste, and then now you will see this light green color is on its own frame. Or the other thing you can do with it, I'll just Control and Z to get rid of that in the new frame. Or the other thing you can do with it is, say if we select area, so I'll select the eye for now, and if you look at this, it says you can hold down Shift to move the content. So hold down Shift, and if we click and drag this, you'll see it's now missing, and now we've moved the actual pixel from one spot to the other. So the other thing you'll find is, if you do make a selection, and you don't deselect it, that selection actually stays around, and you can move that selection too. So there's really not much uses for this. There's only one thing that so far that I've thought of that you can use with this, and that is you can cut out something in a particular shape and paste it into another layer, kind of like a die cut thing. And then, so for example, I'll just go to this section here, Control and C, add a new frame, Control and V, and then now I've got this bit cut out. So if you think about using this in a smart way, you can use this as like a cutting tool. And over here, I've just made this in between the video breaks. And you can see I have been able to draw a heart and use it as a cutout and just make something like this. So aside from that, I'm not really sure what else you can do with the selection tool, but it's good to know that you can do stuff like this with it. So with that, I'll reset everything back to the default. And you may also notice that once we have this selection tool, it seems to just stay there. To get rid of it, just select the tool again. Just click on it and then it will go. So with that, we'll look at the next thing that we're going to work on. So just real quickly, these two tools are pretty much identical to this one. It's just how it executes is different, how it comes out and how you use it. So rather than being able to select all the colors that you choose of the same value, you can actually just click, oh, where'd that come from? You can actually just click and drag a box, or, let's get rid of that one, you can click and draw a circle, but this tool is very hard to use though. And that will do the same thing. So you can either copy that selection or you can just move around those pixels. So with that, we will move on to the next one. So the last tool we're going to look at in the toolbox is the Dithering tool, which is this thing that looks like a checkered flag. So what the Dithering tool does is, to use it, we'll actually need a primary color selected and a secondary color selected. So I'll go in here, click on this one, and then I will choose a secondary color, which should be something similar, maybe a darker or lighter color. So I'll pick something that's darker, and then that's selected, yes, and then I'll start using the Dithering tool. So what you can see is it starts to do checkers automatically, and depending on which one's foreground, primary and secondary color, that will change which one comes up as the pattern. So that will happen if you switch that around. So what is the purpose of this tool and why use it aside from being able to make checkers very easily? Well, back in the old days when computers had a lot less power, colors weren't able to be blended together effectively. Unlike what you see in Photoshop or any online art program these days, it just couldn't blend colors. They were just not capable of doing that. So a lot of artists came up with the Duotone Dithering technique, and I'll give you an example in here. So if you look at the thumbnail here, or I can actually just zoom out here. So you can see that from far away, it looks like it gives like a in-between color, like a misty, transparent look. And that's how you gradually get from one tone to the other, which is just like screen printing toning effects. And that will let you get in between colors, and depending on how big or small the dithering is, it can also gradually change the colors. So if you see a lot of manga comics modern day still use this toning technique to give shading in grayscale. and their toning process is actually very, very hard, the way they used to do it anyway. But we won't get into that. It's a totally different thing. But basically, this was the solution that they came up with to blend colors into each other. And that's why the dithering tool exists, is for you to create that old school style of artwork using pixel art and to get the same effect. Back in the old days, I would have reckoned they had to have individually done these pixels alternately, so light one and then just do it in a checkered pattern. But with something like this that has this tool, this is actually a really powerful thing. So it takes a lot of that manual side out of it. But anyway, that is pretty much the dithering tool, and that's what it's used for. It's for you to blend colors together when you're trying to limit your color palette to make it look more like authentic pixel art, or when you just want these cool checkered patterns. So there you go, that's the dithering tool. And I will get rid of this. And then finally, we will take a look at these things over here, and then I will give you some challenges to do. But otherwise, once we look through that is pretty much everything. So let's get on to it. So the next menu we're going to look at is Transform. Now, what the tools in Transform do is they let you manipulate the pixel on a canvas-wide basis rather than individual pixels like all the other things in the Tools program, in the Tools menu. So just to give you an example, flip vertical, clicking on this one, you're going to see that everything will be mirrored and these will all flip around. So there we go. So now that's all flipped around. And if we highlight this as well, it will also let us flip horizontally. So if we hold down Alt and click, and now it's flipped horizontally. So you may be thinking, well, hang on, that has switched from up to down, so why isn't that vertical? It's using the axis, which is a horizontal axis, to flip. So this way is a vertical axis, so this is flipped vertically. And that's pretty much how it works. So when would you ever need to use this? Well, in a lot of game design back in the older days, a lot of characters always faced one direction or the other, left or the right. And there was usually a character running across the screen, or fighting game characters facing each other. So basically, if you were able to draw them facing one direction, and then you just flip the sprites around when you wanted them to come back the other way, then that's all you needed to do. You didn't have to redraw it again and make sure you got it exactly. It was just mirroring them. And then that was pretty much simple. So the other thing you can do is holding Control will apply to all layers, which layers we'll look at after this. Shift will apply to all frames. So if we wanted to, we can hold down Shift and then click on this one, and we'll now see that everyone else is now flipped around. So I'll change that back actually. And then hold Shift and click again. And now every single frame has mirrored again. So that makes it a quick thing to do if you've suddenly decided you wanted to flip the pixels and mirror them for some reason, like either your character is now facing a different direction or you want to mirror an image, then that would be the easiest way to do it. Next thing is Rotate. So clicking on this one will let you rotate. Just to go back to this one for a second. So another thing you can do is if you have colors that are on opposite sides and they are colored differently, you can technically flip them around each frame. And then if you look up here, now it looks like they've got this flashing thing going on. It's just because the frames are flipping around back and forth. So that's the other thing you can kind of use a mirror tool for if you have frames. Otherwise, pretty much, yeah, flipping characters from left to right would be the key reason to use it. So the next tool in the Transform menu is Rotate. And Rotate is pretty much exactly the same, except we're just rotating things 90 degrees. Unfortunately, from what I haven't been able to work out anyway, you can't do 45-degree angles. Otherwise, that would have made the sun rotating rays animation thing challenge from last week. That would have made it really, really, really easy to do. But because this can only do 90 degrees, then it's kind of limited in that regards. But same thing, you can also animate with this as well. So if we were to click on this, and spin it around. Click on this and spin it 180. And then it was hold Alt to rotate it the other way around. And then this one will be facing down. And then this would go back around. And now we've got a rotating alien. It's pretty cool. Oh, which way is it? Down, down, down. There we go, that's better. Yeah, so that's what you can use rotate for if you're animating, or if you happen to just decide you want your character facing sideways or upside down instead, then rotate would be the easiest way to do it. So let's just set that back and undo all of that, and then we'll go into the next tool. So the next tool in the transform is clone current layer to all frames. So if I were to click on this, everything on my selected layer, which is currently this yellow highlighted one of frame 1, all of these frames will turn identical. So if we click on that, and there you go. So now all of them is this one. And as you can see, it's animating, but nothing's happening because they're all the same. So if I were to undo that, and I say pick frame number 4, and then I wanted to use this as to clone, I click on that, and now all of them look like frame number 4. So yeah, so that's just a way if you wanted to change all the frames into this one as a base, or a particular frame as a base instead, then this would be a useful thing to do. So the next tool that we're going to look at in the transform menu is align image to the center. So pretty much as it says, I'll just move, let's say for example you've been moving your objects around in your frames to all sorts of different places, and then you've done quite a lot of different changes and alterations, and you can't control Z and get everything back into the middle without undoing all your hard work. Just clicking on this will center your image, your object back into the middle. So that's a great way to have everything back into the middle. And as highlighted in this menu, it says if you hold down Shift key and click on this, this will apply to all frames. So rather than highlighting each frame and then clicking on this, you can just hold Shift at any frame and click, and now everyone's back into the center. So that's a really, really cool thing, and this just makes things a lot quicker. And if we click on this cross here, we'll see one extra tool, and this is crop the sprite. Now crop the sprite will actually cut the canvas size and crop it so it exactly covers your sprite image, your pixel image. So if we click on that, we can have a look. Oh, it's not doing the top. How odd. Well, it's meant to do the top and the bottom as well. I've tried it a couple of times and it has done it, but sometimes for some reason it doesn't want to. But regardless anyway, so it's supposed to crop the top and bottom as well as the sides. And ideally this would be used for if you're making like a avatar on a website forum and you want an animated GIF character or just a PNG graphic thing, you can crop it to the size that you need. So that's pretty much everything for the transform tool. So let's go and look at the layers and what they are exactly. So I hope you had a chance to try out some of those things while the video was on pause, and if not, then that's fine, you can go back to it later. So we say goodbye to Space Invader, thanks for your help, and we will start looking at layers and what we can do with them exactly. So this is something that I've set up, and as you can see I got other things up here that I will quickly go through, just to explain basically what layers are and the advantage of using layers. So in many digital art programs, layers let you work on different layers as implied, but any area that's not colored in will be clear. So if you have kind of like a clear floating page and you paint pixels on top of it, anything else that's not painted will be seeable, is transparent from underneath. So think of it like animation cells. For those of you who don't know what animation cells are or how they work, which is understandable, as most things are digital these days, animation cells are pretty much clear plastic transparent pieces of perspex or acetate, and people draw and paint on them, and then that looks like a floating image that's sitting on a clear piece of plastic, and then you just lay that over onto a hand-painted background, or a painted background of some sort that doesn't animate. And basically having enough of these clear painted cells overlaid into a background, then you can get moving images if each of the cells are animating a scene. And layers in a digital environment is exactly the same, except you have more control and you can chop and change and erase things pretty easily. Whereas on the hand-drawn layer, if you mess up the paint, then, or you put the paint down in the wrong order, then that's it. You've messed it up and you need to do it again. So just to show you what this actually looks like, because you only get the thumbnail here, but so here it is. This is what the final one looks like. And basically I've just made the car bounce up and down like it's traveling really fast in an unstable way, and put these zooming lines in the background just like you would in an anime, to look at like it's going very, very fast. So the main reason why layers are really good is, if I were to animate this, draw this on one layer, it becomes really, really hard and time consuming to do, because every time the car moves up and down, I'm going to have to delete bits of the blue and then draw in bits of the car and make sure all the areas that are a bit changed matches perfectly as it's animating. So there'll be gaps when I move something around, and then I'll have to repaint that. So you can imagine if you're doing that for many, many frames over and over again, that's going to get very hard and very time consuming to do. So just to explain what I've done here, so the layers menu over here, right now I have two layers, and in Piskel, the layer that's selected will be the one that's showing in proper full color brightness. The one that's not selected will be a light faded color. So if I were to select layer 2 now, then now this is showing me what layer 2 looks like on every single frame that I have a layer 2 on. So all I've done with this to animate this is to use the hand tool here, and then hold Alt and do the wrap around and just drag it for every single frame. I copied this into every single frame, and then I just drag that slowly, bit by bit, frame by frame, until you get this whooshing effect. And how fast you make the frames go again will determine on how fast that looks like it's animating. And again, if you wanted to set a specific frame rate, but you want it to animate faster, all you do is you just move these pixels along further every single frame instead, and then you'll pretty much get the same effect. And the other thing is, the layer that you select is the only one that you can work on, so you can't accidentally have layer 2 selected and mess up the car. Or likewise, you can't select layer 1 and work on this and accidentally mess up the background image, because it's locked to the layer you're working on. So keep that in mind, and it's pretty cool. It's really powerful actually to be able to animate something in layers and then just put it all together. It just makes it so much easier. So the next thing I'll show you is, this is where it gets slightly a bit more complicated, and this next one here is Wolverine. So as you can see from this here, I have this red swishing background going again, and again it's actually the same one as the one from Back to the Future. I've just made it red and given it red tones instead. However, what's going on here is there's actually 3 layers going on at the moment. There's the background swishing, the central character, and there's one for the hand and the claws coming out. Ideally, maybe put the claws on its own layer as well, but it's up to how much you can handle and how much you want to draw. So pretty much, where is it? Okay, so I initially drew the character first, and then I slowly made his eyes squint, and that's pretty much it. And as you can see faintly over here, you can see the hand coming up and then the claws coming out, and it's faded like this because it's not a layer that I've selected at the moment. So it still shows it to you, which is really cool, I think, but just faintly enough so that you know it's there. So looking at this area here is never touched at all. I've just drawn this once and copied and pasted the frames, and that's what layers allow you to do. It allows you to add another element without having to erase anything from the layers behind. So then you can animate things in bits and pieces without being worried about interfering with anything. So again, with the background, same thing, the background is just on its own layer, and I've just made that slide up and down in the background. So that is the advantages of using layers. So I will show you real quickly how to do one, and yeah, just basically so you get an idea of how it all comes together. And once you actually see that, if you're finding that a bit hard to understand, once you see it, it's actually pretty easy. But for those of you who get what's going on, yeah, feel free to keep watching. But this is pretty much the stuff that they used to do in old school video games, and even I guess some of the modern ones that use full pixel art. And it's scrolling backgrounds and things like that. So I'll get that set up and I'll come right back. And in the meantime, feel free to play around with the layers. So to make a new layer, you click on this plus sign, and you can also rename things as well. So by double clicking on this, I'll say Wolverine. Well, and you have to press enter to save the name change. And what I like to do actually is keep the number in front, just so you know which layers is which. So that is on layer 2, and this one is 3, and I'm going to put BG for background. That's layer 3, and this one is layer 1, claws, and press enter. If you don't press enter, it will not save the file. So there we go. And that, if you do have things that are much more busy with more things going on, naming them makes it easier to find what you need to highlight and what you need to move. So you can also rearrange layers by highlighting the layer that you want and clicking the up arrow or down arrow. See, now it's currently in between the body and the claws, so that looks weird. Or it's now right at the top above everything, so we can't see everything. So now that's back at the bottom again, or we can put Wolverine at the front, and now the claws will pop up behind his back, which looks even more weird. But yeah, so you can draw on layers whenever you want and rearrange it afterwards, but it's easier to do it in sequence, like focus on the main character first, and then do the foreground, and then do the background. So that's the way I work, that I find the easiest. Or you can do the main character first, and then the background, and then anything in the foreground afterwards. So we'll get to that next bit that you can try. And yeah, feel free to play around with the layers. So make a layer by pressing a plus, and then maybe draw a circle, make another layer, do a square, make another layer, and just paint something else on it, so you have 3 layers. And then just play around with the up and down, and just move them around and intersect them with each other to see what it does. So you can pause this while you're doing that, and then I will show you the next bit. The next thing that I have is a butterfly. And for those of you who got to play around just now, I hope that's kind of made a bit more sense. But in this video, I will go through everything that I'm doing exactly and the process of how I'm doing it. And so for this butterfly, all I've done is given it a very simple 2-frame animation, just up and down, because butterflies tend to flip their wings around very quickly, so it doesn't matter that it's 2 frames. The original one that I did is actually a lot more smoother, as you can see, and that took up 7 frames. And however, that needs to be at about 24 frames to look like it's flapping, and even then that's pretty slow for butterfly flapping from what we can see. So all I've done is taken this image and I've deleted every in-between frame except for the up and down, and then I've just put it into this. Now as you can see, the pixel sizes are pretty different. I have a larger canvas to work with for this one because I want scenery to be able to go past. And to do that, you can go into here and resize your frame. And if you change these numbers, I usually just multiply them by doubles. So the default is 32, and then you can move up to 64, and then 128, and etc. But you can really use any that you want. And the more pixels you have, the finer the detail you can give. So if you want to do stuff more detail, and absolutely bump up those pixels as well. And yeah, and then you'll find you can get more of the precise shapes that you're after. So that's all you need to do, is just resize that. Resize the canvas content, you don't really need to do that, but that's up to you. You can find out what that does by itself on its own. But for now, let's start on this one. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to name this Butterfly. Oh, Butterfly, and right now this will definitely be layer 2. And then I am going to make a new layer, and I'm going to name this Grass. And that will be layer 1, because that will be right at the foreground. So as you can see, because we are working on layer 1 at the moment, this is now blank, because this is showing us what's on layer 1, sorry, for every frame. And layer 2 is the one that has Butterfly. So if we click on that again, then we can see all the layer 2s on every single frame. So we go back to the grass frame, and I am going to go in here and pick a grass color. I've done this already just as a test, so I have the colors pre-chosen already. Oh, wrong file. That's okay. So I will go here and quickly pick out a grass color. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So I am just going to quickly just do grass here. Try to do this as fast as I can. Just make some go all over the place. Okay, I'm going to try as best I can just to cover up. Alright, and then I'm going to use paint bucket tool and just cover what I can straight away. Not completely everywhere, because I still want strands of grass to show. Oh, okay, that will pretty much do for now. That is fine. Sorry, I'm still going. Okay, so we want to make this as complete as possible as we can before we start animating and adding more frames to it. So I would like to give this a bit of shading and also a bit of highlights. And we are going to try out some of our other tools now that we used earlier. So we are going to use the Lighten and Darken tool. And for now, we want to darken. So if we click on this and then we hold Control and also Shift at the same time, so it will darken and also only apply once per pixel, as in it will only darken the first time we go over it until we let go of the mouse and press it again. So I'm going to hold Shift and Control, and they'll darken and apply the 1 pixel only. So there we go. So I'm just going to just do grass as well. Just curve them out. And I'm just doing this very quickly. You can take your time with this if you want. Okay, see, when I click on it again a second and third time, it gets even darker, and that's fine. So that in a way is an easy way to color. But again, just be careful not to burn out the colors. As you can see, some of these are getting a bit dark. Okay, so now I'm going to put some highlights, and again, to do that, we'll just color it in. We don't have to hold anything. So the highlights will go on other sides. Just roughly anywhere is fine. Okay, that's good enough for now. So now you can see that because we have only colored in one layer, it's now doing this flashing thing. I will turn this down just so it's not so distracting to look at. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use this rectangular selection tool, and from anywhere that covers the highest length of grass, and we're going to click and drag a rectangle over it. And once you see this light blue color, it means it's currently selecting this area in this layer, not any other layer, just this layer. So do Control and C again, hold down Control and then tap C, and that will copy that. And then now what we're going to do is we are going to go into Frame 2 and paste that in with Control and then press V. And if we are to turn this back on, we can now see that there's grass now on both layers, both frames, sorry, and they are identical. So nothing's flashing in any way or animating, and that's exactly what we want. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back to layer 1, and we are going to start putting in the sky. We are now going to make the sky in the background. We are going to make a new layer, and we will double click on this text to make it editable, and we will name it 3 sky. And again, if you're following this right now, feel free to pause the video anytime if I'm going a bit too fast. And then we will use these arrows while this layer is highlighted and move that down to the bottom, because we want this at the very back. That's why it needs to be at the bottom. And then I'm going to go in here and pick a nice blue color, not too dark but not too light either, because we're going to gradually make it a bit lighter. And then click the paint bucket tool over here, and then we are just going to fill this layer with blue. And again, we're going to get this happening, so I will turn that off just so it's not so distracting and hard on the eyes. And then we are now going to go back in here and pick a slightly lighter color. I have done all this already because I've tried this out earlier, but to do that yourself, all you need to do is move this just a little bit slightly to the left, closer to the white. So this is my slightly lighter color. And the easiest way to do this next bit is click on this stroke tool, and then as it says here, holding down Shift will let you draw straight lines with the stroke tool. So give it maybe about a third of the page, hold down Shift, and then just click and drag that across. And now we have this line. And now we want to press the paint bucket tool and fill this area as well. So what we're going to do is, we're pretty much just masking off the areas to allow the paint bucket to fill it up faster. Go back in here, and then we are going to pick a lighter blue yet again. This should be the last time we need to do it. Again, go back to this stroke tool and hold Shift on here, and then click and drag it across. Now if you see it doing this, just try and move back up and it'll snap up to the horizontal mark again. And then let go after that, and then for the last time we'll select the paint bucket tool and then go back here and click in the space. And I will, no, I can't reach it from there. Okay, so now if we look at this, we can see what that looks like, and that is what we want. So the next thing we're going to do is paint some clouds in the sky. So click on this again, and then if you want white, just move this circle all the way to the left hand side upper corner, and that'll get you white. I have pre-made white already, so I will just choose it from here. And we can go into the pen tool and just roughly draw, some clouds. Something like this, and then another one just roughly like that. And then we are going to get the bucket tool and fill that again, and that one too. And now we have clouds in the sky. So the reason why I didn't make a new layer for the clouds is because pretty much in this particular scene, the clouds and the sky will be moving at the same pace because there's nothing in our sky, and because of that, we don't really need to differentiate that the cloud and the sky is moving at a different space. If, for example, you had stars in the sky and it was nighttime and you wanted the clouds to look like it was moving a bit, then I'd recommend putting it on a separate layer. So for now, in the daytime, when there's nothing in the background, the clouds can sit with the sky on the same frame, and that's perfectly fine. So we are going to give a little bit of shading to the clouds and click on the paint dialog again and click on this lighter gray color. And I suggest getting a gray color that's kind of similar, just slightly lighter. If it's a bit too dark, then it just looks a bit funny. So I'm going to get a slightly larger pen size just so we can do this faster. And just give this some basic shading. And we are just going to do like the underside bits of the cloud. And then over here, we're just going to paint this. Just very basic will do. Okay, and then that is pretty much done for our clouds. Okay, I am happy with that. So now, on to the next bit. Oh, and just very quickly, just to make things look a bit more colorful, I've just decided to very quickly go back into the grass layer and let's just draw some flowers in there very quickly. So I'm just going to select the yellow, make it a nice orangey yellow, and no, actually, sorry, I'll just put a bit of red, change the pixels down to nothing. You don't have to do this, only if you want to, and just going to here, here. Oh, I should cover the whole thing. Right here, and maybe just one more. Okay, that will do. And then now we are going to choose yellow. Yep, that's fine, and just do a tiny little bit there. Excellent. That looks good. So now that we've done all that, we are going to start copying all these foreground and background elements onto the next frame. So because we've changed the grass, then it's fine to just copy this one again. So we are just going to highlight this and then hold down Control and then tap C on the keyboard, and we'll go to frame 2 again and make sure the grass layer is highlighted. Yes, it is. And then so we are going to Control and V to paste that in. So now they look identical. And then we're going to go back to layer 1, and we are now going to select the sky frame, a sky layer, sorry. And then we are going to select all this time and then copy it and paste. So now if we turn this back on, perfect, that's all we need. Nothing flickering, nothing out of the ordinary. That means everything's gone through perfectly. So now we will get to animating it, and to do that, all we pretty much will be doing is using this hand tool with the Alt key held down, which is Wrap Canvas Borders. So I will show you what that does. And so we go back to frame 1, and what should we do first? We'll work on the grass first. So because we are going to make sure the clouds move pretty slowly, so yeah, we'll work on the grass first. So I'm just going to select the grass, and all I'm going to do is, so while this tool is selected, the move tool, we are going to hold Alt, and you'll see what happens when we do that. First, I'll show you what happens when we don't hold Alt, and we've seen this with the alien already, with the Space Invader, but holding Alt lets it just constantly replicate the pixels over and over again. So that makes things a lot easier. So I'm just going to Control Z and undo that. Now, it's really important to determine how many frames, how many pixels each frame is going to move your image. So anything in the foreground is going to move a lot faster than things in the background. So in this case, let's make our pixels in the foreground move 3 pixels per frame. So that doesn't seem like much, but I'm just going to shift this 1, 2, 3, so you can already see what's happening there. And I'm just going to turn this down a bit. And then this one, I am going to move this forward another 3 times, but because this used to be in the same spot as frame 1, then that means we'll need to move it twice as far, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What was that, 6? Let's go back. Well, let's zoom in. That should make it easier. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's overlapping. That's correct. 4, 5, 6. Okay. So that's done. Now, the other thing we can do as well, if you wanted to, is to make the butterfly go up and down as it's flying, just slightly. And you're probably thinking, wow, that's pretty extreme, that's more stuff to add. But yeah, this is the more complicated stuff and challenging stuff I was getting at. Feel free not to do this, but thinking about it, I think it'd be really good to add. So looking at the butterfly, so we have to select the layer that we want to work on, so don't forget about that. And from my understanding, if a butterfly is flapping its wings down, then the body needs to go up a bit. All right, that makes sense. So I am going to move this up. Is that changing anything? Oh. And then this one actually goes down a bit as it's flapping up. Probably a bit too far. Okay, that looks alright. So we only need to do that once, and then we're going to replicate the rest of the frames. So that seems okay. Now for the very background, on frame 2, click on the sky, and we are just going to move this 1 pixel. Okay, so again, with the hand tool selected still, we are going to hold down Alt on the keyboard and then click and drag it just 1 pixel that way. So now you can see everything's kind of going And then I'll just do this once more so you can see it again. So now we're going to duplicate this frame because we need the up motion on the butterfly wings. So we are going to duplicate this one, and then click and drag this past the second frame. So now we can have the flapping motion replicated. And for now, you see there's kind of like a slight stutter because it's now showing these two frames in sequence instead. So there are two frames opened side by side. So that will be fixed once we put the next frame in. But now we choose the grass again, and we are going to move this. How many would it be? It'd be 6 pixels again because this one is now 6 further back. Okay, so it's going to be 6 pixels again. 1, 2, 3, and now this matches frame 2. That's why we need to move it another 3. 1, 2, 3. There we go. It's starting to look like something. And then now we click on the sky again, and then we are going to move this again just 1 pixel. So hold Alt again while it's on the hand selection tool. Move it just 1 pixel across. And then I will do one more. Which one do I need to copy? I need to copy this one out. So because I have to remember which butterfly wings are flapping. So I will select this one, copy this one, and then we click this down. So now the butterfly is still flapping its wings, still going up and down. And then now we go back to the grass and again move this 6 pixels across. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then the sky, again, move this just 1 pixel across. Okay, so I will continue with that, and then I'll show you the results afterwards of what it looks like. But of course, you'll see that immediately. But feel free to pause the video and give some of that a try yourself. So just working with different layers, it doesn't have to look this great, remember, just try anything to make something scroll at different speeds. So I'll be right back. So that was actually a little bit time consuming. So all I've done is I've animated about 20 frames, and as you can see from the preview here, it's turned out pretty nice. To go through the whole motion of the clouds coming back around again, that would have taken a very long time. I unfortunately don't have the time to do it, but here's what it looks like. And that's pretty cool. That looks really good. So when you're using layers and pretty much just panning a camera across, yeah, pretty much everything in the foreground will be going past much faster than it is in the background. So when you do that, you'll move the foreground items more pixels per frame across, and anything further back away will be less pixels per frame. So the clouds for this one in particular were only 1 pixel each frame that was moved across to the right, and the grass at the bottom was 3 pixels per frame every time it moved across. So the reason why I had to keep copying alternate frames rather than the one above it, it's because I had to keep this flapping animation going on. Otherwise, yeah, the butterfly wings would just stay still and they wouldn't move if I kept getting from the same frame over and over again. So that's why I had to grab the one before and then stick in the animating ones. But that is pretty much how it works. By holding Alt and the hand tool and using that wraparound technique, which allows you to just endlessly grab stuff, and it even works at the top and bottom as well. That is the easiest way to animate background images. So you just have to draw something that fills up the sides or makes sense when it loops back around, and that's all you need to do. So I've been working on a really complex one, and it's just complex because it takes quite a long while to paint and color, but I will show that what it looks like, and then that will give you more ideas of the things that you can do. Just the last few more things before it's the end. So before earlier I had the Back to the Future car, and so for me to have gotten the accuracy of this vehicle, I actually needed to find reference images for this. and then import it into Piskel, and then I traced over it basically and just got the images, the toning and shadows and the shapes of the vehicle by tracing over it. So how I did that was, so right now I've opened up a new Piskel working page, create a sprite, and then I've just clicked and dragged an image that I found on the internet. So this is Enzo Ferrari, and we'll just resize this back to 64 pixels for now, because if it's at 128 or so, it will tell me that it'll crash because there's too much information on there that this program is not really normally does. So if you click on import, and it'll say, do you want to replace your current animation? This will replace your animation. Are you sure? Yes, because we don't have any animation on here. So now you will see these are pretty photorealistic colors. So if you were scrolling through this, this actually shows you all the colors that are currently in use at the moment. And they can't even fit it all in. It's missing all the reds. So what I basically did was, I just picked out, I did a new frame, turn this off, and then I turned on onion skin. And all I basically did was choose the color that's up, select the frame, choose the color that I like from here, and then select the frame that I'm going to be painting on, and then just start painting with it. Now, because onion mode is on, it's still going to show you the different gradients that you have, but that's not actually there, so just keep that in mind. And then you go back into this one, and then you pick a darker color for the darker areas. And that's basically all it was. Go back to this, pick a darker color, click the pen tool, which I forgot. But yeah, that's pretty much how I got the look of the DeLorean. So things like this is really great if you need to get the exact shape of a vehicle or a machinery and you need it to look identical or close, otherwise it won't look recognizable, then this is the best way to do it. Just import an image and then just, yeah, open it up and go over it yourself with your own lines. Because if you do just try to replicate every single color on every single block, then they will look photorealistic. And that will be pretty much not quite the point of pixel art, because yeah, pixel art should always look cartoony and have that just the limit colors look, whereas this one has like a few hundred colors already, and that's not what we're after. So fine to use it as a reference, but don't copy it exactly. Just choose a new frame and then turn on onion skin and then just trace over it as best you can, and then you'll still get really good results. Now, challenge for you out there who are after something difficult. I did this earlier on, and see up over here, see if you can work out how to do that. I kind of gave a hint earlier on with the shape selection tool, but yeah, see if you can work that out. That should be very interesting. Then another one with layers that I have. So this is something that I did just now. And this one was actually very, very time consuming, very, very hard. All up, this probably took me about 2.5 hours to do. Probably about an hour to draw it, an hour plus, and about another 40 minutes and an hour to animate it. So just to show you what it looks like, there it is. So as you can see, I'll go back to the other one. As you can see here, there are actually 7 layers that I'm using. So there's the foreground layer here. I wanted something zooming by really quickly, just to show the speed of what's going on. The car is on its own layer, and it's bobbing up and down. The road, it's its own layer, and it's moving pretty fast, but not as fast as the foreground. And then the close buildings are kind of moving pretty fast, because these buildings are a bit large. They're pretty close to this bridge that the car is on, this road. So I've spaced them to almost the same frame, pixels, the amount of pixels that they've been moving. This one looks a bit further away, so these don't move as fast, and these ones look pretty far away, and these ones are only moving 1 pixel every frame. The sky, because the stars are pretty far away, I didn't want to give the impression that they moved really quickly, otherwise that wouldn't make sense. The DeLorean would be traveling very, very fast to do that, and also the backgrounds would be moving faster. So I actually made the stars move once every second frame. I think maybe once every 3 frames would have been a bit better, but in this case, it works perfectly fine. So if we look at the end result again, and that's basically it. So this is zooming by, this is zooming by, this is going slightly faster, but the buildings behind is slightly slower than these, and then the buildings at the back is much slower as they are much further away. And then also the stars are moving once every alternate frame, which makes them even slower than the far away buildings. So that's pretty much it. You can do a lot of stuff with this program. It's just, again, depending on how much effort you want to put into it or how much of it you actually understand. But keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and just really look at a lot of old video games as well. All this stuff is all inspired and comes from the original video games that came out in the 80s and the 90s. And they did some really, really great things back then. So that's it for me. I hope you found that fun and you didn't find that too complicated at all. But see you next time then. And do check out more videos on our YouTube channel. Just look for Casey Cardini Libraries YouTube. And then, yeah, see all the other cool stuff that we have. If you missed our stop motion special last time, then feel free to check that out as well. I think you'll really enjoy it. Thanks, and I'll catch you next time.